Well, thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Lots of fatigue from UN General Assembly, from a good summer, good weather. So Bob, to support you, I was a small rice farmer, and I used to eat 3 rice meals a day: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Although today I try to cut down the rice consumption, as you know. Well, Rob obviously has money. USAID uses its funding to support production, to feed more people. What about policy? Can you eat policy? You can eat rice, you can eat food. Feed the future is very much to feed the people. So what about policy? Can you eat policy? So this is the topic of my presentation. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is to look at the new thinking of the food system. So we're facing many challenges, but also meantime opportunities. So we need to think differently. So policy innovation is very critical. So in addition to rice innovation, innovation in rice, innovation in many farming systems, sustainable intensification, I think innovation in policy is equally important. So without policy, you will not eat well, although you can barely to eat. Now, how IFPRI strategic research contributes to CGIAR goals and upcoming SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, the post-2015 agenda, will be hotly debated in the next probably 15 months or probably next 12 months, September 2015. So will be the time where the countries will begin to commit their SDG goals. So old thinking about the global food system is, food insecurity is many supply problem, population is growing, we need to produce more food. But today, it's not just more production. It is also accessibility, whether poor people have income, have the means to access to food. The old thinking is agriculture intensification with more output. Well, I'm glad that Rob also mentioned about nutrition. So the new thinking is more nutrition per unit or per drop of water, per hectare of land, or per kilowatt of energy, or per, let's say, tons of carbon emission. So sustainable intensification with more nutrition. Then smallholder, is small still beautiful? We heard that in Africa, yes, smallholders probably are still beautiful, but in Asia, where I come from, the small is not beautiful anymore. Sometimes it is ugly. So how can you help the smallholders to transform to bigger size, either to move up or move out? Then self-sufficiency. Yeah, we know that part of the Green Revolution story actually is very much driven by self-sufficiency. Whether we can produce more to feed the population in my country. Everything can wait, but not agriculture. So that was a slogan for the Green Revolution. But today, we need to think globally. So open, transparent, and fair global trade provides more gains. So if we all work together to share with each other what we have and we don't have, we will gain much more. And we also didn't pay much attention to food safety. It wasn't a concern until maybe 5 or 6 years ago. But today, the safety of food system is increasingly at risk because of intensification, because of the more interaction between human beings and animals, farm animals, and overuse of certain inputs like pesticides, fertilizers. So the intensification brings opportunity, but also brings challenges as well, and risks with it. And right now, the global governance system is still very much dominated by UN agency and the OECD countries. But now we have new players, emerging economies, China, India, Brazil, Indonesia. All these countries account for a very large share of global food trade, imports, exports, and the private sector. Philanthropic organizations, NGOs, all have a role to play in our global food system. And policy innovations can be game changers. I wanted to repeat some of the issues both Bob and Rob have discussed. Asian Green Revolution. Yes, semi-dwarf varieties from CIMMYT, from IRRI, helped tremendously. Semi-dwarf rice came to India first, Vietnam, China, Cambodia, many other countries. And semi-dwarf wheat came to South Asia even before rice went there. Semi-dwarf rice went there. But don't forget, the policy investments played a huge role there. So without the policy changes, the farmers would not be able to access to very, very much needed fertilizers, credits, and technologies. The Vietnam's reform policy, starting from 1986, so the government gave land to farmers, individual farmers, open up the market, particularly export market, rice export market. And before the reform, the rice export was banned. And IFPRI, together with Asian Development Bank, with some other donors, I'm not sure whether USAID supported that program, we analyzed the options to reform its market, its trade, and so Vietnam accepted some of the recommendation to gradually open the rice export market from 1 million metric tons per year to 4 million tons, then until everything is open. So that really helped to increase farmers' income, to help the country's export of rice. So policy research is critical in two channels. One is it provides enabling environment for technology to be developed and adopted. I think Bob very much focused on that. Yeah, you need enabling environment for technologies to be developed and to be used. But there's another important channel, probably equally important channel, that is policy can affect some of the goals, development goals, directly without going through technology channel, which is equally important. So for example, better allocation of resources. Yesterday we had a very exciting debate between Minister of Agriculture and Finance. You can see, they differ not. For example, the Minister of Finance from Uganda said, "Oh, agriculture only contributes 1% of my my tax revenue, but spends 20% of my budget. I don't pay attention to agriculture." But in the meantime, the Minister of Agriculture said, "Well, agriculture accounts for 70–80% of my employment. 1% agriculture growth can lead to 2% or even 3% of overall economic growth, so-called multiplier effects." So this sort of information knowledge provided to policymakers, ministers of finance, ministers of agriculture, or even civil societies, NGOs right now, can really empower them to allocate the resources more efficiently and more effectively. Governance institutions, so critical. Why so many technologies have not been adopted? Because the institutional capacity is very weak. Farmers' organizations, I think Bob mentioned, and Rob also mentioned, yes, they have a huge, huge role to play. The farmers' organization is an institutional issue. Just give you a couple of examples how some of the IFPRI's policy research had led to some of the impact. You may recall that in 2007, 2008 food crisis, during 6 months or maybe 1 year, food prices increased by 50% or even 100%. In the case of rice, it was doubled or even tripled within 6 months. Why? It actually had a bumper crop of rice. Rice stocks in China and India were huge, but the rice prices went up by more than 150%, sometimes even 200%. The policy, it's a policy failure. So sometimes the policy research is not only going to recommend good policy, but also to shoot down the bad ideas or bad policy. The rice export ban was the culprit behind the rice price spike in 2007, 2008, particularly 2008. And IFPRI provided very much needed support to various debates, global debates, G20, G8, and the UN debates, how we're going to control or how we are going to manage food price crisis, food price spikes. So that information through our research was very critical. Shaping public investment priorities. Resources are very limited. How do we set the right priority? How do we connect the information? Just like in Bob's case, we don't know how much acres of rice we have, how much production we're going to have, where. And public investment is, I think it's equally important to have that information available to policymakers, not only in their own country, but also in other countries, so they can compare, they can peer review, and the citizens can use this information to make their policymakers or government politicians accountable. Why certain countries spend very little on agriculture research, on agriculture investment. If the citizens are empowered with this information, they will push their political system to make some policy changes. By the way, so we have a very large database on agriculture science and technology. I think Ninka was here. She was sitting here just a few minutes ago there. And in the meantime, we also have a speed database that monitors government expenditures on agriculture, on infrastructure, on education, and beyond. And supporting country-led strategies. Rob mentioned that in one of his final remarks. So until the country lead, drive, and own their development programs, we will not be able to achieve a lot of development goals, including SDGs or even MDGs. So let's work together to support their process. Just about a year ago, IFPRI approved its new strategy. And in that new strategy, we have 6 research pillars. And many of this research involves very strategic blue sky research. And our research also fits into the SDGs very well. So not only IFPRI's research obviously supports CGIAR's goal. CGIAR has, and this right now has 4 strategic objectives: reducing poverty, increasing food security, better nutrition and health, sustainable management resources. So if you look at the 6 research topics at IFPRI: sustainable intensification, better healthy, promoting healthy food system, reforming trade and market, transforming smallholders agriculture, improving governance and institutions, and strengthen resilience. So all this supports CGIAR's 4 strategic objectives. And IFPRI and CGIAR's 4 strategic objectives are also aligned to SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. So I was in New York for the last several days. We were very much engaged in some of the debates about the Sustainable Development Goals. Even before that, we were in that process. We have 17 goals right now. To my taste, there are too many, 17. I cannot remember more than 8. Last time we have 8. Yeah. And so this 17 goals, some of them are truly goals. Many of them are just instruments. Many of them are enablers. So we needed to work together to make sure that we have a clear sort of delineation among goals, instruments, and enablers. And right now we have 169 targets to support the 17 goals. Many of these targets are not measurable. They are just aspirational. And we wanted to make sure that these targets are truly measurable and make the people accountable to these targets. CGIAR IFPRI is very much part of that process. So to support IFPRI's strategic research, we usually identify strategic blue sky research. I just wanted to give you some of the examples. Around ensuring sustainable food production, we very much focus on nexus approach, the interlinkages. To link water, energy, food, all this together. Obviously, climate change, climate smart agriculture is part of that story. And in promoting healthy food system, we do a lot of experiments and evaluation of the value chain for nutrition. So value chain is not just for smallholders' income, value chain for smallholders' nutrition, for urban consumers' nutrition, of course, smallholders' income as well. improving markets and trade. So we used to very much focus on output markets, but now we wanted to invest more, particularly in our new research, to focus on input markets, land, water, finance, and labor. And the transforming agriculture is small, still beautiful. Can we leverage medium-sized farms? In many African countries, the medium-sized farms plays a huge role, but they need access to mechanization, to credits, to inputs, and to markets. So building resilience. How can we use a system approach to link short-term relief to long-term development, in the meantime, without damaging our environment, in the meantime, climate smart? Institutions and governance. So new institutions and implications of new technologies and implications on institutions. So some of the newer technologies, IT technologies, even some of the technologies Bob have introduced, how can we develop some of the new institutions or develop new institutional arrangements to support the development and also the use of the new technologies? Gender, we're pushing very hard to disaggregate the data by gender, by sex, men and women. So without evidence, without data, we will not be able to recommend good policy. So in conclusion, we are calling for a new thinking of the global food system. Let's all think together. It's not just me, or it's not just IFPRI. So policy innovations will be key to create a healthy and a sustainable food system for all. So policy institutions is equally important. And finally, let me emphasize again, country-led, country-owned, country-driven strategy. Let's all support that. Our research, our policy, capacity building, let's all work together to make sure that the country realize their vision. And by September next year, we develop a roadmap together with all these countries. Thank you.